Hello and welcome to the NeuroTechSF Hack Night for October 21st, 2021. Thanks for joining us and excited to be here this week. I think we have a lot of really cool stuff to cover. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Okay. The first thing I wanted to talk about, which is a cool announcement, just came out really recently, is the Kernel Flow finally announced the, or not necessarily finally, but good news, today's the day that they announced the pricing. And not only, they explained that unlike most of the research devices, this one, you don't have to shell out a whole lot upfront. And I do think that is really cool. So, free to use to universities for the 12 months. So from when they get it, second half of 22, you get 12 months. Now there is the whole portal and the web page and so on, the whole back end system. But yeah, absolutely. I think pretty interesting that you can get the hardware and experiment with it, see if it's what you need, see how the data works, prepare for any interfaces that you have to write or the way that you change your data pipeline. So it is pretty nice. I think that this is a wonderful piece of news. I think not every startup has the capital to do this kind of program, but Kernel certainly does. And I think it's a great example of leveraging, okay, here's what we're working with. How do we use that to change things or improve things? And in this case, I think it's pretty impressive. The other thing, if you ever wondered what a kernel costs, well, here is the pricing information. And I have to admit that this is about what I was expecting. And I'm not saying that like, I'm some amazing pricing predictor, just one of those things of like, okay, yes, the pricing reflects the sophistication of the software and hardware. So if you're getting an entry level, you're looking at about 37,000, and you get a year of the kernel cloud service. And then presumably after that, it's going to be, I'm just going to kind of use the industry standard target of about 30 to 35% recurring revenue. Now, I have no idea what kernel structured, but let's just use that standard price and just assume a third of whatever it is. So this is 37,000. We're going to say 12,000 a year for the subscription. It does seem like they have it counted out so you combine it and it works out to about 50,000. So, all right, fair enough. But yeah, that's the minimum configuration. If you want half coverage, which is 26 modules, it goes up. I guess we could figure out the price per module, but whatever. And then the maximum configuration is 52 modules, and that's going to be a bit. But again, when we talk about some of these EEG systems and specialized pieces of scanning equipment, 200,000, 300,000, 500,000 is not out of the realm of how it usually goes. So for a fairly sophisticated device, it's fairly portable. For that kind of money, you could buy 2 or 3 and have your subscription and do your experiments. So you have to work the agreement. You are not expected to purchase it at the end of it, which is cool, that there is no commitment required. And you get the software. All right, so they haven't decided the kernel cloud pricing. You can just take my speculative number because they don't know what it is, but just industry standard for recurring revenue after the sale, if you're going to do hardware, was a third every time I heard a number. So there you have it. Yes, you can add more modules, but they might be production limited. Can you get more than one device? One device per group. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So they don't want you to do multi-subject. They just want you to purchase the configuration that you need. Fair enough. And so 52 modules, if you were running the half FNIRS, half EEG configuration, 26 electrodes, 26 FNIRS sensors. I'm not sure if that's comprehensive or exactly how good the distribution is, but that does seem pretty good. I mean, it seems like a pretty dense EEG array combined with a pretty dense FNIRS array. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing on the Kernel Flow, see if there's any messages, comments, or at least I hope that I can stop sharing. Okay. Anyone have any comments on the way that Kernel is approaching this? I do think that is really, really cool to see that it's kind of a, you know, you don't have to pay up front. You don't have to guess if this is what you need. You get a chance to try it. Clearly shows a lot of confidence in both the hardware and the software and the maturity of the system. And also just that they're not putting the risk on the academics, right? If it turns out that the device isn't a great fit for whatever they're trying to do for whatever reason, they're not invested in it. They can just return it to the pool and Kernel can work with other companies. So it is nice that it seems like they're more supply constrained than they are necessarily looking to maximize their revenue at this point in time. I think they are trying to get the broadest reach and show the broadest impact as they're scaling. So it makes a lot of sense. And as John mentioned, John Griffiths from the Hack Nights and NeuroTechX, the Kernel does kind of have control over the data in the sense of the user needs to have an account. They need to have an encryption key, and the data is encrypted on the kernel servers, but the user gives the key to the researcher for a period of time to use the data. So I think you'll have to forgive me if some of this is incorrect or whatever, but I do think you have a few possibilities, such as someone can decide to revoke access to the data later, which is interesting because I think that's unusual, at least compared to how it is normally. Like at this point, if you collect data on a subject, there's nothing that would compel you to not use it or to use it or anything like that. But in this case, it would be interesting if, a patient, or I'm sorry, a subject in a study was like, I'm not comfortable sharing my data anymore. I've reconsidered, something like that. That could have some implications. And then the other one that I think is kind of interesting is like, if you lose access to the portal, I'm not sure if they're comfortable with you downloading and storing the data locally, if they want you to use it online through their pipeline. So I think there's some really, really fascinating things there. I think it also kind of, the two seem to go together. If you have an ecosystem where you control the data, giving access to the device for a period of time is not as big of a problem, because if people send back the device, they potentially lose access to the data too. So I guess there's ways that those two things are synergistic. Maybe it's easier to give away the device, if you have control over the data and so on. But I do think those are both interesting aspects. A very different pricing strategy, that you don't have to do things up front, you don't have to commit and so on. And a very different data strategy where I used to see this in data center type things where if you're planning on moving to like Amazon Cloud, some companies get extremely uncomfortable with the idea of our data is sitting on Amazon servers. And if some employee wants to look at our hard drive, they can just mount it and look at whatever the contents are with a virtual machine. So there were very elaborate, and there may still be, schemes where, when the virtual machine goes to mount the drive, it needs to get some kind of encryption authentication from a third party, and you control that, right? So you have granular control over whether you're going to allow a given VM to mount a given disk. And I mean, it's tackling a problem that exists in data centers, which is people want to put their data in a shared environment, but they don't want people to be able to inspect it very easily. So I think it's interesting to see the same concept come around to user data in research. And again, I think you need a certain level of sophistication to put together a platform like this. To do the encryption right is expensive. To manage the whole ecosystem, to make sure it's robust, to make sure it's sturdy and compliant, all those things, right? You're putting a little bit of a burden on yourself by creating such an architecture. But I still think it's quite interesting to see whether this is going to be the direction for other well-funded startups that are pursuing in the neurotech space, and just how successful it is. I hope that this allows a lot of people to kick the tires, and it would be wonderful if sort of this business model of selling the right gear to the right people was more of a focus instead of just making a sale, which I think is sort of the more traditional model. So I think it's great to see the idea of an aligned sale or whatever. So if there's any researchers, I'm going to ask a poll. Now, probably this isn't worth doing because you know how it is with polls or whatever, but I have a question. And that is, would you be okay with your hardware vendor controlling the access to the data you collected? And just curious what the temperature is on that one, because I think I'm in the know, but that's, of course, what a terrible host doing a poll and then providing the, their answer or whatever. But no, I think it would be interesting to see whether people agree or disagree. And I could also see it from like the subject side. It could easily be that people would be more comfortable doing a study if they knew that after the fact, if they change their mind, they still have the right to sort of revoke their previous participation. It could be that that's actually a big barrier. And I think that would be interesting if that changed things as well. So that's the Kernel Flow pricing announced, business model announced, and exciting that they have that academic purchase program. Okay, and let's see. The other thing that I was super interested in is I saw this on Twitter, and this was really cool. And I know usually that's not how I start statements. Like when I see stuff on Twitter, it's usually not cool. But interesting paper, it just came out a week ago. Open source high performance tool for automated sleep staging. So I thought this was really interesting given the discussion that we had a few weeks ago. We were talking with Nathan from his lab, and we were talking about sleep scoring, sleep stages. We were also talking about lucid dreaming, and we had a wonderful guest talking about the lucid dreaming community on Reddit and their attempts to sort of measure the lucid dreaming. So one of the things that we talked about was the sleep staging and sleep scoring and how it's done using sleep spindles and slow waves and some of the other things. So in a very timely follow-up, we have a paper that basically announces this toolkit. And let's kind of, I'll skip on the introduction. It's hey, using machine learning to get classification on sleep is tricky. So they went with the Dream open data set, and these things are linked down below. But in this training and testing set, they have this variation, this breakdown of subjects, and 585 unique full night recordings. So I think it would be really, really good. There's now 2 data sets that I would love for us to dig into on these hack nights. The first is this one. And then the second is a cognitive load data set from HP that they made available as they put together their cognitive load study. So that has 100 subjects. And in this case, there's 600 recordings. So both of those are fairly rich as these open data sets go. In this particular case, I think it would be really good for us to grab the GitHub toolkit that was published, install it, grab the data set that was used for training, look at the examples, and then see if we can actually get it to do inference or calculation classification based on the toolkit in the pipeline that's already there. So I think that would be really, really interesting to do. And I hope that we can do that this year. I think I didn't have time this week to put any of that together, but hopefully starting next week, in addition to having people come on and present their work or their research to us, I think it would be really nice to dive in and reproduce some of these data sets. So as we're sort of wrapping up the spicy challenge now, I would like to come back and talk about that. We're gonna try adding the emotive sensor to that one. So I think there's one more round of stuff that we would like to do there. But as we finish that up, then I think that these would be excellent things to do on the weeks that we don't have someone doing a presentation. So really, really cool. Okay, so what exactly output does this generate? Well, it scores the sleep stages. It gives this, I'm sorry, I forget what exactly, I want to call it a spectrogram, but they may use a different term. And here are the stages plotted with like a probability confidence rating. Also, they track transitions between them, which is pretty cool. So this paper goes through the whole thing and talks about the performance, talks about how generalizable it is. But right here, let's see, do they have the links? Okay, materials, data sets, great. Okay, so here is the data set that it was trained on. And then, oh, more than one, okay. So NSRR data set. Yeah, okay. The MESA data set. CFS data set. Wow, quite a few data sets went into this. Okay, now I thought we had, maybe it's in this link, or it's the paper, but there were some references. Okay, this is probably just part of the introduction. All right. All right. Well, at any rate, I don't see where they have the direct download link, but let's take a look at the, oh, right. This is the Dream Learning Open data set. And let's see if we can find the info. Okay. So this is the README for the actual algorithm. Now I'll go ahead and put this in chat. Hi, Ibrahim. Thanks for joining us. Okay. And that is the sleep algorithm. So I'll go ahead and show again. Excellent. Automatic sleep staging, event detection, artifact rejection, spectral analysis, and the hypnogram itself. So there's API documentation, there's tutorial. I think we should go through this Jupyter Notebook. I think that would be great. And the installation is fairly straightforward. You can install it through Conda, which is definitely the method that I would use. I've gotten more and more into the Conda environments and just sort of being able to make one. So, you know, very nice. Make a new one, clone into it, you know, install the thing, good to go. Okay. And then basically you've got the documentation with the notebooks and the data set. So you can get that and you can start hacking. So here's an example of some of the outputs. This is, I guess, labeling the sleep spindles. So this is in the raw EEG. And I suspect that this is a view that Nathan is familiar with. Then over here, we have the stages that it detected. We have the band powers through frequency, focusing on delta through beta, start of beta, or mid-beta. Then you have the transition probability between stages. So a little Markovian, but we have a clear set of states. So we're trying to understand the transition probability between them, because we're not going to jump from resting to stage 3. So there is sort of a sequence. There is the topological plot, the plot of the average slow wave on different electrodes, and then the mean vector length. I have to say that I'm not quite super familiar with. Okay, so this is from the Walker lab at UC Berkeley, and I think that is really cool. So I brought up the lab page as well, just so we can see what they've got going on. So the Center for Human Sleep Science, that sounds very exciting. Okay. Yes, the Helen Wills Neuroscience Institute and the Henry H. Wheeler Brain Imaging Center. Cool. So let's see. And yeah, this is the lab. So I did reach out to Raphael, and he would be excited to talk to us in a few months. And I think that'd be great if we can have him join us and go through the software package, tell us a little bit about it, and so on. And then I was thinking it would be nice, maybe we can just have a chat with him and Nathan, but who knows? That's up to Nathan if he would find that exciting. So yeah, I thought that was really cool just to see the publication. I'm very excited to dig into it. I think it is definitely related to what we were talking about. And given how much people are interested in sleep disruption and lucid dreaming, I think that if we can figure out how to get Muse-S data into this relatively cleanly, that would be a nice project for the community. So I'm not sure what's going to be the best route. Is it like Mind Monitor, or would it be, EEG notebooks or something like that, and then trying to integrate this? But I think it would be, or, the pedal app or something like that. But it would be really cool to see if we could make it so that if you have a Muse-S and you can run some basic Python and install the libraries and do whatever, that the result is you can actually score your own sleep. I think that would be super interesting. And I know for sure that I would like to kind of see my own sleep patterns and sleep stages, and would be a fun set of experiments. And it would be nice to kind of see that. Okay, so this is the data set Dream Learning. And I thought this was really cool because whether this is the data set included with the file or not, I would like to grab one or two open data sets and see if we can run that particular package on it and see what kind of results we get. So I thought that was also very interesting. Here is the, let me go ahead and close the video. Here is the link for that. All right. And here were two papers that I wanted to show that Raphael published that I thought was really interesting on our last discussion. And I won't dive into them too deeply, but I just thought the topics were interesting and what they infer and imply. Okay, so brain functional connectivity upon awakening predicts inter-individual differences in dream recall frequency. So another one of those discussions that we had was, hey, there isn't a great way to predict or distinguish which people recall their dreams vividly and which people don't, and what exactly is different about that. So yeah, pretty cool to see that, from the Walker lab, that they found a correlation between the brain connectivity and the how well people remember it. Now, with connectivity and asymmetry, I'll say that it's interesting. The topic is interesting to me because on the one hand, there's a little bit of skepticism. If you're just talking about an asymmetry effect, it has a little bit of a credibility problem because a lot of bogus things can be seen as just an asymmetry effect. So on the other hand, there's a lot of legitimate effects that can be seen as an asymmetry. So I know that's extremely detailed, but the point is, if you present asymmetry as sort of a way of detecting some particular phenomenon, I think it has a slightly higher barrier of credibility to clear than if you're presenting something else. However, there's a lot of interesting effects that seem to show up as asymmetry. So it's kind of cool that brain connectivity in this case seems to be a marker that gives them an idea of what's different about it. Now, we can dive into the paper and take a look at it and so on, but I just thought it was neat. Hey, here's a marker. Okay, and then the other one, which this is a little more of like a discussion oriented, but I thought it was, again, cool to talk about in context of the recent discussion, that I'm going to summarize the paper really quick, and maybe Raphael would be irritated to hear this description. But basically, lucid dreaming sort of involves some level of sleep disruption. And it might be extremely minor. It might be not super important, but I think the paper kind of points out that sleep disruption is rarely a good thing. And that in general, when you're disrupting the sleep, you're reducing the body's effect to do the things it wants to do, to regenerate, to recover, and so on. So I think that is an interesting corollary, that inherently lucid dreaming involves some level of sleep disruption, and that in general, sleep disruption is not a super positive thing. I think a lot, I can certainly imagine the rebuttals being that people don't do it all the time. A little bit of sleep disruption is fine. That once they have the protocol down, the disruption is minimal, and that the positive effects greatly outweigh it. And it seems like many people that do lucid dreaming are profoundly passionate about it. So I don't doubt that it's a very moving experience. I thought it was just neat in light of the discussion that we had. Let's see. I'll do one more poll. Today is like a polls kind of day. By the way, most people, 2 out of 3 votes. It's not a huge. This isn't like a Gallup, but yeah, like I think it's a little. You now have 3 parties in the relationship between the experiment and the data and the subject. So there is now a vendor. There's a question of what happens if they get bought down the road, which isn't very likely, by someone that has a different idea. Typically like Facebook, they certainly bought Kernel. What if someone doesn't want to maintain the platform or something like that? These are unlikely scenarios, but they come up in conversation as soon as you have a platform that potentially people would lock into. And it's certainly, I mean, even with like Valve, Steam, and all the other proprietary networks, those kinds of conversations seem to come up quite a bit. So pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so here is my question. Okay, so we've got the sleep disruption poll. By the way, I'm just more interested in what people think than anything else. It's not like I'm like, all right, this poll of 3 is gonna settle this for the universe. But I think it's super cool to kind of be able to see what people think. Sometimes, consensus opinion is with you. Sometimes it's not. Always interesting to find out which one it is. So Another thing that I thought was really, really cool, there was this hackathon, the Brain.io hackathon that was announced. This was posted on Slack about a week ago. But I thought it would be really cool to take a look at the projects that they have predefined. So I've been hoping to add people's projects to the NeuroTechSF Hack Nights. And I think it would be really, really cool that anybody that has a software project that they're working on, a hardware project that they're working on, a student project that they're working on, to come talk about their experience. What software packages are you using? What hardware are you using? How was it? How much data have you collected? How have you found the experience? What are you doing with the data? What are you processing it through? What results are you looking for? Are you finding them? Where are you in the analysis? There's a bunch of questions, as you can see, right? I just want to know about your project. Like, I'm super interested, because there is a pretty active community of people doing BCI projects. A lot of them, I think there's some nice activity on the open BCI forums, which is wonderful. I would like to see NeuroTechSF Hack Nights be a place where people can ask for expertise on their project, show off their progress, and tell everyone how cool they think it is, or ask questions about a project that they're considering. So please, if you know anyone working on a cool BCI project that you think would like to talk about it, ask some questions, or show it off, please let me know, drop it in chat, contact them, let them know that they can reach out to me. That would be lovely. And then similarly, if you run across something that looks interesting, we would love to know. I think it would be cool to bring together the community and have people share their expertise so that they're not working on it as a silo. And I think that would be really, really cool. In addition, I thought we would take a look at what kinds of projects were defined within this Brain.io challenge, because I think that gives a good idea of the kinds of things people are working on and looking at. Let's see if we can make this a little less ridiculously large. So, all right, 4 principles: slow waves, SSVP, motor imagery, and evoked potentials. Beautiful. Okay, here are the projects, and I'm just always fascinated to see what exactly people are working on with BCIs. So the speller, the unicorn speller, all right, oh, that's cool that we have some demo videos. All right, there's your unicorn hybrid black. There's the research lab. All right. And we are turning on a fan using our minds and LED Velcro. So the unicorn speller is a piece of software that Unicorn offers. It is a P300 speller that integrates with their software cap. This is similar to the demo that Neurable did a few years ago, if you're familiar with that or if you've seen it. And yeah, they do sell this application for other things, like instead of spelling letters, you have icons, and they can be representations, directions, and so on. I think it's cool to see, okay, let's take that and turn it into a smartphone, smart home controller. And again, this was part of the Neurable pitch, I believe, or originally on the EEG device. It was like, if you're wearing your headphones and you think to yourself, geez, it's kind of cold, I wish the AC would turn off or something, you'd actually be able to do that. So here it is a few years later, we're seeing someone else try the same thing in a hackathon, leveraging the existing Speller software. It sounds pretty cool. It sounds like the kind of thing you could actually try to, get going on a hack night. And it sounds like it's pretty reasonable. Okay. Wow. Dream painting. You have to wear a unicorn brain interface while you sleep, and then it'll generate a network based on your EEG. Pretty cool. So like a very fancy visualization based on a whole night of sleeping that generates some kind of dream images based on that. Okay. Unicorn Sphero. So this is going to be using the Speller to control the robotic ball. Sounds similar to the RC car type demos that lots of places have done, but pretty. I haven't seen a Sphero, I have to admit. I don't even know what that is. It's educational. Does that mean anyone likes it? As soon as I hear something's educational, I assume it's not any fun. Okay. $150 for okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, I have to admit that's pretty neat. A Sphero sounds like something you could demo BCI with pretty well. I have to say I'm kind of on board. Unicorn Sphero definitely sounds cool to me. I would like to see that one. Hold on, do they have a video? Oh yeah, let's go. Okay. There we go. Yeah, that's cool. That seems like the kind of demo that would be very comfortable for people. It's self-contained. It's kind of fun. Yeah, this is great. Man, all right, I'm sold on this Sphero demo now. I think I'm gonna have to get one of these. Jeez Louise. I'm gonna just stop the. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so the Sphero looks pretty good. What have we got next? Okay, Unity Rehab. Well, fair enough. I could see where you could think of a couple of applications. FNIRS and EEG. So this is the Gnautilus FNIRS. And what that is. Okay. Okay, so they have a cap that lets you combo the FNIRS and 8 optodes with the G gamma cap FNIRS. That's pretty fascinating. Looks like G-Tech has some new products. I'm pretty impressed. I was happy with the Unicorn Black. Okay. 10 hertz, 8 channels, 8 transmitters, 2 receivers, 1.5 hours of battery life, wireless. It sounds Bluetooth. That sounds Bluetooth to me. And here you go. Yeah. You can wear that on your next fashion show and you will make a statement. Oh, but that is cool. Can we see the... Guessing these are the optodes. And these look like the unicorn black sensors. So here you go. So I guess without the plastic, it's very similar to the kernel. Pretty cool. And that would be 8 sensors. So you'd be looking at about 16 sensors in total, 8 electrical, 8 off the EEG. Let's just see how this configures. Sorry, we're going through the projects, and now I'm just in this shopping for a Gnautilus thing. This is how I end up spending my money. It's great. Okay, so we got the Gnautilus Pro 8. No problem. Let's do it. Oh, we're in the United States. Oh yeah, we're doing everything. Oh yeah. I think I need to choose. Oh, right. So I guess if you get familiar with the sizing, then this should be the same. Well, there's the cap. Some electrodes, I'm probably picking ridiculous stuff, but $6,000 to $10,000 range for the full kit. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. FNIRS and EEG control. I would like to see this. I still have not seen a compelling demo of FNIRS and EEG together that does something that either FNIRS or EEG can't do. That doesn't mean that I'm skeptical. I'm ready. I'm ready to see it. It sounds a little vague, but I think it'd be pretty cool to see what they come up with. Orthosis. Okay, so this is one of those hand type demos. This is a usual way that you think of moving your left hand, think of moving your right hand. Potentially you could have that do something like make the sphero turn left or the right or whatever. Okay, Unity games, pretty cool. Stimulate the brain with TDCS. Yeah, that's, oh yeah, speaking of which. Right. Well, I think next week or next time that we get a chance for Alex to join us, I would love to hear about that. Yeah, and thanks for being willing to do that. No rush at all. But yeah, right there. That would be cool to see what kind of stimulation. I think that sort of covers this interesting area, right? With stimulation, we're comfortable saying and measuring what we're putting in. But we can measure via EEG changes that happen after stimulation, before stimulation, et cetera. You can compare the two conditions. But I think it's still a little bit of a, do you feel like it's helping you kind of thing. I would love to see a little more tangible idea of here's what we're targeting, here's what we're going for. We see this state when we start the treatment, we're going for this state, we've reached this state. And now the patient's like, yeah, absolutely, this is the change I want. So obviously there's a lot of electrostim that does follow that model, but I think it's definitely what I'm more comfortable with. And I think that it's a good one. So this would be a cool one to see, what examples they would go with. Okay. Flight control. This is similar to the Sphero, but with a drone, and then you have the Z dimension. Your own hacking project, hey? And then Swarm Swan. All right. Data analysis projects. I thought this was cool too, because I'd be interested in seeing what kind of data analysis we could potentially put together here. Stroke rehab data analysis. So this kind of goes back to something cool Kyle was saying on one of the NeuroTechSF hack nights, was they were able to use in this particular study, let's see, is this, yeah, this is a Muse 2016. Okay. Wrong thing. Okay. So this Muse 2016 has, obviously, if you have a Muse 2, even better, Muse S, all the same stuff. But even if you have this version from 5 years ago, it has an accelerometer, it has a gyroscope. So there was this really cool illustration of sort of a real world application for neuroscience. If you have your Muse on, you basically have head tracking in a limited way. Right? As I move my head around left, right, the accelerometer measures the XYZ, the gyroscope measures the XYZ. So I don't have a reference for where I am in space, but I have the reference for which way my head is moving. So it's relative, not absolute. And with this, there was this ambulance service that needed to go out, in some cases, to people that were 3 hours away from a hospital, and it didn't work for helicopters for a variety of reasons. And then on the way back to the hospital, they couldn't image patients that were suffering from strokes because they didn't have the equipment in the ambulance, but they have to ride for like 3 hours to get to the hospital where they'll actually be able to do the imaging. So when someone's having a stroke, and again, this is secondhand from Kyle, so if I'm misremembering or misstating any of this, my apologies. But there's two kinds of strokes. There's one where the two kinds of strokes that they wanted to distinguish is one where something is occluding the blood flow, and there isn't sufficient blood in the brain. There's a blockage, and in that case, the solution is blood thinners. So you want to do something that clears up the blockage to restore the blood flow, so that you're suffering less brain damage in the ride to the ambulance. The other treatment is if you're having a stroke where you're bleeding, you have a blood vessel that ruptured or whatever, and you would want to give coagulants. You would want to stop the bleeding. You would want to stop the damage. So you have these two contradictory treatments. You don't have a way to determine what exactly is happening. And if you simply do nothing, then the patient will definitely suffer damage. So I thought it was really neat that there was a published paper that you can use this to determine like the type and location of the stroke simply from how the person is able to move their head. So like if they're having a stroke on the left side, then you won't see movement there the same way that you will on the right side. And so you can immediately tell that the region, and I guess there was something about that you could use to also isolate the type of stroke. Now, as with all of these studies, I think to what extent it gets deployed in the real world and, do they use this wide scale and so on. But I think that, wow, what an amazing, piece of research, proof of concept, and what a tangible way to impact people's lives, to take something horrible that's happening to them and just make it less bad, less impactful, shorter recovery times, or less loss of function for when the episode is over, that they can still have a normal life. So I think, you would really be surprised at what you can infer from this simple data. And I think that kind of creates this, why is Apple nuts about restricting the hardware to their sensors? That's why. These inadvertent findings are very powerful. There's no way to predict where or what they'll be. And I think that in a strange way, the response of the vendors is to hide all of that from you. Like if you can't see your own data, I know it sounds like, I'm cynical or whatever, but I do think it's a strange way to solve the problem. People don't understand how valuable this data is. People don't understand all the things we could use it for. I know, we just won't let them see it. It's definitely a solution. It has an elegance to it. But there's aspects that are probably not ideal there if we're looking at it. Okay, so I just thought that was really, really cool. I would love to see projects and implementations like that. That really, really excites me to talk about. So stroke rehab would be great. I remember I was talking to really like a neurosurgeon trying to understand, is there a detailed post-stroke surgery or post-intervention how are you tracking how well people recover? And it really didn't sound extremely formal or like, okay, there's a physical therapist, or there's sort of some kind of therapist that they'll work with for a few sessions, but it definitely didn't sound like we're gonna holistically look at where you were. We're gonna figure out all the things you need. I guess that's, I'm imagining a healthcare system that doesn't quite exist yet, but it would be cool. It would be cool to use metrics and data to guide our treatment of stroke patients long term as they recover from that incident. Um, yeah. So I would be very interested in how they are assessing rehab and what exactly they're looking at, because I was having a hard time finding where exactly people that have had strokes go to work on recovering their skills. If you have a broken leg, it's more straightforward than if you have a stroke, which is strange to me. Unresponsible wakefulness. Is this where people have extreme difficulty waking up? I have to admit that, well, this is one of those things that I'm nervous to Google, because we're going to end up in a rat hole. Oh, I'm sorry. Severe brain injury. Now that is way better than, like, I have a hard time waking up from an alarm. Cool. Okay. Is there like just a Wikipedia? Whoa. All right. Well, that's not good. Okay. So let's see what data set they have here. Of vibrotactile PC patient disorders of consciousness, and optimized pre-processing feature extraction classification. Wow. So I guess I'd be interested to know what they're classifying. Okay. Locked-in patient data analysis. This is a very interesting topic. I think it's similar. The Facebook Chang Lab speller that we looked at, and so on. And the next one is also a speller. So pretty cool to, let's see, once again, to try to do classification on commands. P300 speller data analysis, great. So that's going to be, look at the P300 data, SSVP, ECOG hand poses. So more and more, I think this is going to be a big thing. We just keep seeing that VR companies care about this. AR companies care about this. There's a lot of reasons people want to know what position your hand is in. And it seems like this is coming down the road. So I think it's pretty cool. The Control Labs, I mean, this was their, this is how they got $500 million or a few billion. Between $500 million and $1 billion, no problem. What is that between friends? But yeah, this was 2019, right? Yeah, September. So here we are 2 years later, and I hear a lot more. I'm seeing articles. There was even, just stop sharing for 1 second. All right, so let me just, I think I stopped the screen sharing. Cool. Let me take a look at, okay. And excellent. Okay. So again, let's see. Can we see the Control Labs prototype? It is from 2018. Okay, that photo is huge. Here we go. Okay, so this was the Control Labs wristband right here. And it's got these sensors. Let's see if we've got a good photo. Hey, there's a circuit board. I know you're doing science. You got an oscilloscope and a microscope. That's legit. If you put on your lab coat, you get a diploma from the science community. I'm only messing around. Okay. Similar design. This looks a little bulkier, but has sensors that go beyond just the wrist. So we're looking for fingers as well as hand position. Okay. So this is where it moves your fingers for you. Okay, so if you're trying to learn piano, you can start practicing the movements even before you can consciously do them. That is pretty cool. That is pretty cool, man. Okay, so this would be really fun to measure sort of the trajectory of learning. And I think this goes back to that really cool HP demo that we saw. Let me go ahead, I'll show the... Okay. So within the HP Omniset portal for the Nimbus educational software, they have this, which is kind of like shows you the trajectory of how people learn stuff. You've got the cognitive load and you've got the performance. So the performance is in orange, and the more times people do something, the better they tend to get at it. I'll put an asterisk there. And then the cognitive load tends to decrease as people learn it. And so you've got this crossover point, and then let's say you define a threshold that says when they reach this ratio, I think they've learned it. So if you plot this kind of graph, you could even generalize this to effort or resource consumption, like, you know, whether you're using heart rate, whether you're using pupils, whether you're using EEG. I mean, ultimately, you're just measuring how difficult it is for someone to do a task. And then the performance is kind of like how well they're doing it. It would be really cool to measure the effects of one of those interventions on a mechanical skill. I mean, this was Halo Neuro's whole thing. But if you could show, like, hey, typical time to learn this particular fingering skill on the guitar, or the way to do the pianos, let's say you can assign, I don't know, 20 hours into learning, or 60 hours into learning, it's going to take 10 to 20 hours for the person to learn the skill. It would be really cool to quantify how much having something that can move your fingers for you makes a difference. Because I think it's interesting to consider the scenario of learning to navigate a road by yourself versus following the directions from GPS. People can definitely do the thing where they follow directions many times, but if you remove the GPS, they never really tried to orient themselves. And so in that sense, they don't know it quite as well as someone who would have learned the route without the GPS. And then if you remove the GPS afterwards, they would probably still know how to get there. So there is some qualitative difference in terms of the effort of constructing the conceptual landscape. But it's very interesting to consider, okay, does that come into effect for motor type skills? Like, if I know what I'm trying to do and I'm just struggling with my fingers, when I was first doing drum lessons, man, it's incredible how much you'll struggle to get your legs to do different stuff than your arms. And it just feels strange. And then at some point you can do it. It's okay. You don't struggle with it. So it would be really interesting to see for these mechanical skills how much these augment tools would do. And similarly, I know, me with esports and video games, it's like a broken clock. But when a new game comes out, you have to learn the muscle memory of how to do certain movements, especially on controller-based games. I think for keyboard and mouse, the muscle movements of how one moves around a keyboard are pretty straightforward. But with a controller, there's a little more of a distinctness to the motions where, because the movements are specific and they have a time component and a motion component, you start to sort of learn the movements. And then once you've learned them, you don't have to really think about them consciously. They just happen. So yeah, it would be fascinating to see the actual impact on learning rate by using one of these tools. Is it like the GPS where you're losing a little something because this is doing it for you? Or by feeling the way it moves, your brain can imitate that movement, and there's basically no loss of quality from a learning perspective. So that is really, really neat. Yeah. And so that brings us back to hand pose data analysis. You're probably not going to get fingers out of this, but hand posing, finger posing, controlling them and measuring them seems to be of interest for lots of companies and lots of projects. So it's neat to see this show up in the Brain.io project. Okay, and then the artistic project. So this is similar to the NeuroTechX showcase last night. By the way, that is such a cool series hosted by Chris and John, so definitely check that out. The unicorn painting. Hey, brain activity, use your brain as a generative network. I have to say these demos really compel people. NeuroTechSF put together this really awesome event at the Exploratorium. And it was a little bit of an undertaking. I think everyone involved was so traumatized that they didn't do another event like that ever again. But it was a wonderful thing. And these interactive experiences where you get a chance to like see your own data and respond to it, whatever. I mean, these are standard neurofeedback techniques, but they really resonate with people in a demo. I think there's something about showing people their brain waves in a visual, slightly abstract representation that makes it so that they're not trying to parse it, they're just experiencing it. And it really seems to create an impression on people. I think it's a very cool demo, much like moving the little robotic ball would be a very compelling demo. I think the painting sounds like a very compelling demo that you could give people. Design the interface, and then, I don't know, 3D printers if you want to make some plastic gizmo, and sewing machines if you want to do something cool with their caps. So there you go. So yeah, I just think it's really, really neat to see where these BCI projects are at this point. I think that's a very representative slice of what people do for these types of projects. And I'm very interested to see what comes out of it. So I think that's super exciting to see that they're doing that this year, and I'm looking forward to it. Okay, let's see what's the latest on the polls. All right, so folks are 4-1 on the, are you okay with hardware, the vendor controlling the hardware access, and then the lucid dreaming, 75% yes, 25% no. So I think that's pretty cool. Thanks for participating in the polls. All right, let's see. Next thing that I thought would be neat to talk about is we got most of the emotive bit working. So I thought that I would revisit. Let's see how it's going to be going today. So that sums up the news part to start things up. The hack stuff that I lined up for tonight is taking a look at the data and the sensors from this emotive bit. Recently got the Velcro strap, so I was thinking of taking a look at that. And then if there's any projects or anything people like to discuss, this is a great time to talk about that. And of course, some folks will definitely talk to us later, and that's totally cool. But yeah, this is kind of like, hey, let's hack on some hardware. Let's look at some data. Let's talk about some stuff that's interesting, and let's do the hack night. So what I wanted to work on tonight is I bought a roll of Velcro. Hey. So the Emotibit uses 3/4 inch Velcro. And it's nice because you can just, I mean, these are cheap. You can get them off Amazon. Emotibit has a website they can refer you to buy the particular pieces of Velcro that they use. But they were able to give me the specifications, which is very nice. So now that we have the Velcro, I can actually wear it, which is cool. Yeah, like the previous one was too small. Like I could only really get it around my finger, which is pretty dubious, I think, in terms of what we would really do with that. So I did charge this up for about an hour, and I think it's good to go. We're having some lights, which I'm assuming is a good sign. Now, if it connects to the Wi-Fi, we're going to see a blue light come on. I did recently just get this back, so I'm not sure if I have everything configured right to connect. But yeah, let's see where we are today, and let's see what sensors and measurements we're getting. Now, incidentally, for anyone who's not familiar with the Emotibit, let's take a look at what we are hacking on today. Nice. So I put the link to the Emotibit in chat. And I'll just type in the major sensors. Okay, so it's got a decent mix of sensors, but the one that is definitely the most interesting to me is the GSR EDA. Previously, for galvanic skin response, there were really two options. There was the Shimmer GSR and the Empatica. The Shimmer GSR, well, I mean, Shimmer 3 GSR Plus. Hey, we even have a YouTube video. Cool. This web page is not quick. We'll try the iMotions page. Cool. And then Empatica wristband. All right, let's take a look at this. Sweet. So the Shimmer GSR, you can get it even from places like Amazon. It's roughly a $500 device, uses Bluetooth, has these clips that you put on your fingers, and it measures skin conductance on your hand. So this is a pretty standard device, pretty useful. This, roughly $500. The problem with this for our purposes was by having a device that's attached to your finger, it's just not really great because you have this issue of, like, let's say you're playing a game, a first-person shooter, or you want to use a keyboard and mouse. Part of your hand is attached to this. So to us, a form factor where you can go on the wrist, greatly preferable to one where you have to go on the finger. So it wasn't super cheap. It was Bluetooth, $600, and you are tying up whatever hand you're measuring, so that you won't be able to do kind of like the natural collection with that. Now, excellent device. So if you're simply doing user research, like let's say you want just someone to use a mouse, you're doing a psychological study or a market research study, you want to look at stress or something like that. I mean, this is excellent, because it's going to give you good data. You're going to be able to see the galvanic skin response. You're going to get this kind of plot. So this was definitely the norm, and it was pretty functional. The Empatica E4 is nice because it gives you heart rate as well as skin conductance. And like, wow, pretty interesting. Okay, so you got a PPG sensor. It'll give you heart rate, the accelerometer, and the EDA GSR. So this was kind of your research standard for a long time. And the only problem here is like this is a $1,500 device. So again, excellent, but not super cheap. And then you couldn't stream the data. It's in this API software package because the device is sort of talking to their software stack. It's not super generic. So the Emotibit by comparison is a really awesome thing. It means that for $200 to $400, depending on what exactly you're buying, but let's say $300 to $400, you get the quality of the Empatica E4, even with some additional sensors, and it is much, much, much cheaper. You also get the whole data, and the data is stored on an SD card as well as broadcast. So yeah, definitely pretty cool to see, and super happy when this came on the market. So given that we have the broadcaster working, I thought, hey, let's see if we can get the data working, what it looks like on my skin and so on. The other thing that we might have to do is see if we can get the Wi-Fi, because I see a green and a red light, which is usually a sign that it's on. But if there was a Wi-Fi connection, I think we would have a blue light connected, which I don't see, but let's just see. All right, so why don't we start with the oscilloscope and see if it has the Emotibit connected. It does. Hey, look at that. The blue light came on. Sweet. Okay. Sorry, you probably can't see it very well. There's the blue light. We are on Wi-Fi. I guarantee you my skin conductance is going up as I fumble with this friggin' Velcro strap. Okay, so let's do the oscilloscope. Nice. All right. I definitely feel like I'm on Wheel of Fortune, revealing the spins. Okay, cool. So as you can see, the data is already excellent. Just kidding. Let's get this strapped on. Hey, with this side, let me tighten it up. All right. Hey, here we go. Okay, look at this. I have successfully put the device on my wrist. You know what? I think we can declare victory. There's nothing else left to talk about. Hope you had a good evening. Thanks a lot. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we've got it there, and here you go. So you can only imagine how stylish I would look if I walked into Starbucks with this, but it is legit. Now they have a nice 3D printed case, so I've got that in progress with Shapeways, and so I think it'll be less obtrusive. Like I won't look quite like a board when it's in the case. Okay, so let's take a look at the data. And what have we got? Cool. Well, there's the PPG, there's the electrodermal, there's the humidity in the room, and there's the magnetometer and the thermometer. So we should have ambient temperature, we should have skin temperature, or potentially two different sensors. Now I'm going to move my hand around so you can see like the gyroscope and the accelerometer data shifting around. So in this case, you can see like just kind of rocking it up and down, and you can see it on the magnetometer that the stuff matches. Also, I guess if you move around on the electrodermal, it's gonna mess with the sensor. But yes, we were able to get this package streaming in LSL. We just got that to build. So I will take a look at that in a moment. Stop the share, and then let's see if I can find the package that we built. Okay, yeah, here we go. I've got the broadcaster working, and let's take a look at it. So here is the Emotibit, and the way the software is built, it's going to complain about missing packets because of the way it counts, but it doesn't actually have missing packets. So let's take a look at Curia Recorder. So this way we can take a look at all the streams that are, running. And, well, I thought we had this actively, but let's do it one more time. You know what? I've got the old build where, geez, this is where we were just verifying that it was working, but we weren't pushing the samples. Sorry. At any rate, we did get this working. I just... Embarrassing. I have the old build. This is from August. This is when we were prototyping it. Okay, so that demo was great, but we do have it working, and we do have it storing data. We do have it streaming via Wi-Fi. So as far as we're concerned, we're going to be ready to start doing these studies. Let's see. Now, I think it's kind of I wasn't really prepared to do like, okay, let's record these values and stuff and through the hack night and, kind of like the spicy challenge. But I do think this is really a good thing to look into. I think it's great that we did get it working. We can kind of show the functionality and we can stream the data, and we will start putting this in certain experiments. So first thing I'm hoping to do, I don't know if I can get this done next week, but let's say I'm optimistic. I would like to include this data with the spicy challenge. In particular, the thing I would like to see is how does my skin conductivity change, and what does that plot look like compared to the EEG changes that we actually measured. So we can take a look at the Project Spicy data, I think. Recorder, and let's just take a look at, got some comparisons. Sure, here we go. So if we're looking at like the spicy data, let's just go down to here. Here's an example of sort of like the typical thing we would see. There was this 2 peak, you get this initial spike in your theta, then it dips, then it goes back up, then it dips. I would be really interesting to see what is the trajectory of the skin response. In other words, does it match, or do we have this kind of 2 peak structure where there's an onset and then a recovery and then another cycle? Or is it more of a continuous thing? I really haven't messed around with galvanic skin response data before. So this is actually, when we first get a new device or a new data source, I don't know if, other people do it this way, but I find it very valuable to just start collecting data in as many settings as you can think of, in as many situations as you can think of. Just go collect it. And very quickly, you'll find out how different is your data in different settings, which situations cause different data than others. I mean, these all sound really obvious, but you'll be surprised at how useful these insights are. So to whatever extent, when people start messing around with BCI projects or this kind of data, I think there's a lot of this sort of, well, I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure what to study or whatever. First suggestion is pick a few things that you like to do that you find interesting or enjoyable, record them, and see if they're similar or different. And if they are different, what's different about them? And are the differences consistent between the things, or is there one task that is more different? It's all very basic, but it's a lot of fun, and you will learn a lot about the devices. You'll learn a lot about the measurements. You'll learn a lot about what is really going on in the body as you collect interesting data and find yourself going, well, geez, I wonder what's driving that response. Or, oh, what does the literature say I should have seen here? And with the spicy challenge, Jaden correctly predicted that there should be a theta response. And we definitely do see it. I mean, that was the hypothesis, that we would see some changes in theta and that there would be pain. Now, I don't know that we've established that theta is related to pain in this case, but what we did see was beta changes, theta changes, and in many cases, delta changes. So yes, theta does seem to change in this case with the capsaicin and the spicy challenge. So this is where multimodal collection really gets interesting, because you get the ability to sort of look across devices and look across data sources and inform your understanding of each one. Like it's just cool to be able to kind of, oh, right, these all agree with each other. And not just that, I can see that the onset of each event is a little bit different, and I can line up these events. I see the before the baseline, the start of the event, the duration, and then when the effect goes away and we recover to baseline. That's really nice. That's really nice when you can get all the canonical structures. So yeah, I'm hoping that, like I said, next week we will, I'm going to download the updated build tomorrow. But once I put the correct build on my system, maybe even next week, I think we can do the spicy challenge, record my electrodermal data, and see, what kinds of things generate a stress response. I was also thinking, and I don't know if this is going to be something that, we can manage or whatever, but like, I tend to, sorry, this might be a little strange. You know how like you're watching like a romantic comedy or a movie, and there's sort of a very tense exchange between the characters or whatever. A lot of times you can generate a stress response if you incorporate something like that. So it'd be neat to see if we kind of like, you're looking at a stressful movie, you're looking at a thing where two people are arguing really viciously or something like that, debating strongly on a topic. I think it'd be really fun to kind of look at, as an audience member, does the stress of a charged conversation carry over to you as a listener, or are the only people experiencing that the ones that are having the tense exchange? I mean, some of this is probably established in the literature, but these are the kinds of experiments that I always find very fun to sort of get familiar with the new device. So you're like, okay, here's a very simple thing that will inform my understanding of how this works. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so we've got the Emotibit working. I thought I had the right build, but I did it. So I can't show you that the data records, but I will next week because it is working and so on. And that is pretty cool that basically starting in a few months, in February, March, when the beta units are available, I think, yes, exactly, Ibrahim. That's a great point. So there's this Neurosity partnered with Health. Where was it? App. there was a startup. Oh yes, Divergence Neuro. Sorry, it just took me a minute to remember the name. So Divergence Neuro is using the Neurosity crown to track people's treatment of depression. And the idea is, you wear it and your therapist can see your brain state and how you're doing. I think that's a very interesting concept. And I think, Ibrahim, your suggestion to have some kind of feedback system is spot on, because the market is going that way. Like, people are rushing to come up with the feedback ecosystem. And you're exactly right. What is compelling about this device is the valence aspects of it. It lets you do the psychological experiments. You just need skin response, heart rate, and a couple other things. If you combine that with EEG, and for our experiments, we use an eye tracker, which also gives us pupillary metrics. But really, let me just kind of separate one thing. When you're designing a classifier, you want as much data as possible. You want as many streams as possible, and you just want to understand the phenomenon as thoroughly and robustly as possible. In that process, you might discover that there's a really good proxy metric for what you're trying to measure that correlates exactly with the thing, even though it's not the thing. And I think with a lot of these, it's really what you're talking about. So, okay, my heart rate changes like this when I'm stressed, or my skin conductance changes like this when I'm stressed. Once you know what it is, if you've used a whole bunch of streams to kind of figure that out, you don't necessarily need to measure all of those things. You can just measure the one thing that's the most representative. And so, yeah, I think that technique is going to get widely used. I think people are going to find the right combination of a sensor, a platform, and a practice, a methodology that leads to good results and good improvement. And the other thing is, I think there's a lot of skepticism around mental health treatments, counseling, and therapy. Now, people might be cringing, like, well, what do you mean skepticism? People have bought into it. Sure. Have you ever seen how it works getting health insurance reimbursement for those things? It's treated, there's two categories of treatments that people seem to have a lot of benefit from that insurance companies really don't like. Acupuncture gets treated like it's snake oil. They really will not cover it. And therapy is a very, very specific thing. You have to have a clear diagnosis. The provider needs to submit a clear plan for treatment. I was researching these things for okay, what happens when people do have insurance? What treatment options are available to them? I was appalled. It's nothing like what you think. If a doctor prescribes you a medication, they don't need to prove by blood tests that it's working. I mean, there are a few medications that are monitored like that. Blood thinning medication, or medication that's very, serious. Sure, yeah, sometimes people will require, that you get monitored when you're on it to make sure that everything's okay. But for the most part, if a doctor prescribes you something, they don't need to prove that it worked. They don't need to prove that it was effective. As long as you're happy, that's it. Well, I think with mental health, it's almost like there's no way to prove that it is working. You say you're feeling better, but it could be a very long-term process. I think that without any metrics to prove the changes are happening, without any metrics to show there's quantitative as well as qualitative changes for people that are getting the treatment, then it allows insurance companies to be skeptical in that way. It allows them to dismiss the treatment. It allows them to treat it like snake oil. So what I find so compelling about companies like Divergence Neuro is bringing in the providers and getting them to care about the metrics. Because right now, there's a strange idea, if you go to your doctor and you say, look, I've got a problem with XYZ, they do some tests, they can't find anything wrong, they give you a few of the standard treatments, you say, well, I don't know, it's not responding. They kind of throw their hands up. Well, sorry, tried the standard stuff, see, maybe it'll clear up on its own. It's tough stuff, right? It's not great. If you had a way to measure, hey, doctor, when I came in for my annual exam last year, you scanned me, you saw what state I was in. I come in this year, things are changed, and I'm telling you I'm not feeling well. That's different. You know, there's no, oh, well, maybe it's psychosomatic. It's, oh, look, this person's brain electricity changed. Or look, we can see a difference on the scan, on the image. And having these metrics would really, really sort of, I think, bring us from this unquantified aspect of treatment into something where we can measure the results, we can measure the treatments and the benefits. And I think that with mental health, because corporations and insurers have a stigma against it, it's very difficult to prove for people that are experiencing those difficulties that they're not purely psychological, or that I don't know, like I'm probably not expressing it right, but there's something that's real that's happening to them. And if they could prove that, I think it would be much better for them. So for me, I have nothing but excitement about Neurosity and Divergence Neuro. I think it's wonderful, wonderful what they're doing. And I'm so excited and rooting for them all the way. And this product, exactly. It seems like it can also really, really help with whatever. Yeah, it measures, well, you know, depending on which sensor you have, it's going to measure some sorts of electrical impulses. But yes, it has 3 sensors for PPG, the green, the red, and the whatever. Here, I'll show the 3 sensors on the Motobit oscilloscope. Yep. So it's got a infrared, a red, and a green electrode that it uses to measure your heartbeats. And so, yeah, you can see from the PPG. Now, I am holding my hand up, so I don't know if that's like affecting the measurement. I mean, this is all good stuff to know, right? Which is like, which way does this work better, and so on. But yeah, so in the EKG, what you're, as a precursor early warning. Yes. So this goes to the heart data. Okay. 1 second. There was some interesting information about which data is accessible with the HP Omniset 2. Okay. So HP does not provide raw access to the PPG data. So here we go. Reporting only heart rate and pulse variability, not the beat by beat cardiac trace. We want to protect end users from accidentally sharing sensitive information about their health whenever possible. We believe aggregating PPG data is an important way to do that. Sorry, I think I'm sharing the screen. No. Sorry. Deal with me reading it. Here we go. So, privacy risks of PPG. Let's take a look. Heart rate. And I'm just trying to figure out which particular conditions they feel that they can infer. There we go. So when the Apple Watch launched, you know, watch call 911 when you fall while a run. And I think they also have this for bicycling and whatever. Pregnant woman heart rate sensor was able to detect a serious issue during pregnancy, which is excellent. Okay, these devices. Where? Okay, this is all the potential risks. But do they talk about, I don't think this article, nope. Oh, excellent. Putting our bodies online. Or did you want the HP Omniset data? Yes. Let me get the data sources. Cool. Excellent. So yeah, I think it seems like the consensus is the beat by beat is what allows you to infer various cardiac conditions, maybe arrhythmia, maybe like a murmur, maybe any other thing that you can actually detect by the sensor. I'm sorry, I'm just making stuff up. But yeah, whatever the conditions are that can be detected from the sensors that are included in these devices, the solution seems to be provide a metric that represents heart rate, provide a metric that represents variability, but don't show the raw data. So yeah, the amount of things that you can infer from heart rate is really fascinating. I will say that we had a very fascinating inadvertent. Oh yes, no, I think it's kind of like the interdepartmental thing at a company, and I agree, it is a little silly like to focus on that in particular, but I think it's because of the Apple Watch, the heart rate risks are sort of well known, well understood, and people know that there's sort of considered to be a thing. So I think they're sort of trying to be like, okay, for the people that have heard about concerns with heart data, we're gonna preemptively address them by being like, no, we don't expose it. I don't think people have been told what you can determine from pupils, so they just don't have any concerns around it. And I'm guessing like HP is like, well, until someone scares people with this, we will continue to make it available. But yeah, we tried reaching out to several vendors, Samsung for their watch, Apple, and Garmin. I think of all those devices, you would have the best luck with the Garmin. They seem like the most favorable, but even then, right now as it is, you don't get it. In some cases, you get a metric every few seconds, like 5 seconds. Some cases, you get like a once per minute calculation. It's really sparse. So for whatever reason, when it comes to heart rate data, there's like a standard now that's like, treat it like it's really valuable. I agree with you. I think it's excessive, but I think it's a little performative, but I guess everyone's trying to show how careful they're being with user data as they ask for it. So that's but yeah, it's interesting that now with this $400 device, I mean, they give you the full raw data. So short of getting the Empatica, you wouldn't be able to get it. If you're trying to use an Apple Watch, you're not going to get it. If you're trying to use the Samsung or the Garmin, you're not going to get it. But with the Omniset, you can actually get all 3 sensors, beat-to-beat data, and so on. And I mean, that's what we see with this. So that's what I just think it's a fascinating thing to be able to do that, and on a low cost device. And then the other thing is, when a sensor costs thousands and thousands of dollars, I never enjoyed doing studies with it. Like every time I'm in a place, or outdoors or indoors, I'm like, man, if the subject breaks it, not that they want to, and I'm certainly, but just like, it's never a comfortable feeling, to see a $5,000-$10,000 device wandering around. But for me, like a $500 thing, I can emotionally accept something, like a kid that's skateboarding, falls down, breaks an Omniset. It's like, okay, I hope the kid's okay. But I don't think you would stress about the device. Whereas like a kernel would be a little dear. So I think that these apps that allow the providers and the clinicians and the healthcare companies to just really see that the patient is experiencing what they're experiencing, that it's measurable, that it wasn't always present, that it started happening at some point, and then if they do the right treatment, that it stops happening. That really will, I think, move. I mean, it sounds very simple, but moving to that standard in tracking the inputs and the outputs, the outcomes, the clinicians, the treatments, and the results, I think will really, really improve our ability to practice medicine and the outcomes that we get for patients. It's just something I'm excited about. Yes, big data, network privacy, all those things are a huge problem. But if we could get something good out of this Pandora's box that we're opening with our digital ecosystem, I think that's lovely. So I hope we're going to see more devices, more things that go home with users, more studies that are like that, and more BCIs. I do think the HP Omniset is also kind of a neat research platform just because you have eye tracker, heart rate, and mouth camera built into a fixed platform. So, of course, you can make your own stuff, your own devices, whatever, but you don't need to do the pipeline. You don't need to do the SDK. You don't need to write it. You put it on, and then for most people, that's going to be sufficient. So. Okay, so I think that's it for the Emotibit stuff. As you can see, it is working great. I've got the case on the way from Shapeways. I've got all the Velcro I need for quite a while. And we've got the additional batteries from Adafruit, because this one isn't quite the right size. I'm going to have one that's a little bit smaller. So next week, spicy challenge with skin conductivity data, including I'm going to try to get a feel for what, is the norm for skin conductivity data. Then let's see if we can get a few experiments with the Emotibit. I think that would be cool if we can stream the data, inspect the data, take a look at the structure, look at it in Excel. I don't know if we'll have any plots ready. I think that's going to take a few weeks just because, set up the charts and the data, whatever. But we should be able to look at it. We should be able to plot some basic stuff in Excel. Just kind of look at the time series with the oscilloscope. And that'll be very exciting. And then I would like to look at those two data sets. The HP Omniset cognitive load, I think there's some really good stuff to look at. And then the sleep scoring YASA, yet another spindle algorithm. Nathan, I don't know if you were here for that. But we were talking about this package and the publication of this. Here is the preprint that went with it. And I invited Raphael to join us. He said he would be happy to after the new year. He works at the Walker Lab at UC Berkeley, I think. Walker. Yeah, Matthew Walker Lab at Berkeley. And he's traveling. So I'm not sure, sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot like this, but maybe I would love to have the two of you, have a conversation when he joins us. So obviously, if you're busy, then no worries. But if we can make the schedules align, I would love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation as he presents his work and you talk about it. I'd love to hear you guys talk shop. So sounds great. But yes, I would like to look into that data set and see if we can classify some of the sleep stages, look at the Jupyter Notebook examples, and look at the data. I also would like to do a little bit of, if we get it working, I will probably pick up a Muse S. I just held off for now because I didn't have anything to pipe the data into. But I think it would be cool to do my own sleep studies. Also to see how annoying it is to try to sleep with the Muse S. I think it's fine, but I haven't tried it myself. So, yeah, well, I think this week, that's it for the demos and the news that I had. If anyone has any topics they would like to bring up, I'd love to talk about it. Otherwise, I think we're looking at a slightly earlier wrap for this week. Anyway, that's it. The Emotibit isn't on the LSL. I can't do any recordings, and those were the latest news that I saw. But if anyone has anything they would like to talk about, chat about, oh yeah, the BCI award. Okay, sorry. There's one more thing before we go. I thought this was kind of neat. This was just on Slack. And we had. Okay, so here is the link, BCI award. Okay, so I have to say this was kind of cool. I had not heard of it. This is the Stentrode component for the Synchron BCI. So I was kind of like, okay, what is this? Well, if we take a look at it, this seems like, okay, sorry, I'm skipping through. Right here, this little demo. So they inject these tubes, these tubules, this mesh structure, this conductive, into the blood vessels of the brain. And I guess, you know, this is the surgical procedure that Elon Musk wanted to do with robots. But it's really cool that this is advanced to this point, that they're experimenting with it, and that this was in the BCI award. Now, as we've seen with a lot of these, there's a lot of limitations, performance, time, and so on. And I'm not sure about the viability of the procedure that is done to implant these. Just, I'm unfamiliar with it. I'm not in any way casting doubt on it. But I do think that this is really cool to see yet another application similar to Neuralink, to see another way to try to get the electrode really close to the brain and get past the skull, get past all those signaling issues. All of these approaches to put stuff really close to or in the brain or in the blood vessels of the brain or between the portions of the brain all seem very, very extreme to me. On the other hand, I, again, don't mean to cast doubt on them. The complexity, the technical challenge, the medical knowledge, all of these really seem to be bumping against where we really are in our understanding of the brain. And I just think that's very cool to finally see some of these solutions that are experimental, that are cutting edge, whether this technique works, whether Neuralink works, whether something else works. I think that with enough people, enough brains, enough projects, and enough resources, one of these will work out. And I'm just so excited about the potential to transform lives, to take this from sort of a proof of concept technology and into like, wow, we are really impacting lives and, you know, improving quality of life in people. So I did think it was cool to see this BCI award. This is a speller, the Chang Facebook speller that was discussed recently. And then individual finger movement classification using ultra high density EEG. So this was and by the way, this is, Yannick is there as part of the presentation, which is excellent. NeuroTech X continues to be everywhere in the neuroscience community. So really cool to see. I was excited by these awards. Yes. Excellent. Itamar, I will, what you're looking to find useful GitHub repos? Sure. Well, in this case, here is the sleep scoring GitHub. And let me just see if I have any other GitHub. Oh, the Emotivit stuff. I mean, it might not be super useful, but let me at least get you on the GitHub. So I think that's that. Thank you all for joining us. It was absolutely wonderful to have you. Next week, I think we'll have some more news, but more excitingly, we'll have a couple of demos put together that I'm really excited about. It's been a hectic few weeks, but I'm looking forward to these now that we have the Emotivit working on the Wi-Fi with the correct Velcro and just a few days away from the fancy Shapeways case. So thank you again. It doesn't seem like there's too many questions, and let's give the final tally on the polls. 83% say, I don't want my hardware vendor. Oh, okay, cool. We'll touch on that in a second. I don't want my hardware vendor having control of my data. So I think there is quite a bit of skepticism. And yes, in general, the overwhelming majority agree, 80%, that sleep disruption could be an issue with lucid dreaming. So really cool. Thanks for participating in the polls. I appreciate it. It was cool to see what people think about it. So Itamar, that's a great topic. I would like us to have a GitHub primer hack night. I was thinking of doing it with the spicy challenge, but it was just, I had too many things going for that repo. But I think it would be good to just get people through the basics, right? If you know how to download a repo, set up a Python environment, install it, build the library, these tools are accessible to you. But there's a big gap between like, I'm just interested in this and I know how to interpret the data. We keep running into this. We've run into this many times over the past few years that we've been having the hack nights. And I think it would be great if we could do more to just sort of bridge that gap. It is something ultimately that, there is no easy way to get familiar with coding, Python, GitHub, etc. Yeah, exactly. It's just a little bit of a learning curve. But I would love that we start introducing these concepts as part of these hack nights. So maybe, like, I suspect doing a whole night on GitHub would be awful. I would turn that meeting off as the one hosting it. I don't think I could get through it. But maybe if we do 10 minutes of GitHub every time we're doing something, here's how to set up a repo, or here's how to clone a repo. Here's how to install, the Git client. What is the difference between? Yeah, exactly. It's time consuming. Let's see. I have not. Yeah, sure. Yeah, excellent. You know what? I'll definitely dig that up and see if we can talk about cell structure, signaling, commonalities and differences between different parts of the body. I think that would be a very good topic to discuss, and I'll probably need someone a little more familiar with the topic on that week. But what I'll do is I'll see if I can book someone that can keep me legit on that one. We're gonna need a legit scientist, researcher from a lab to join us and be like, okay, I'll sit through this. Yeah. Vagus nerve. Yes, that came up a few months ago when I think it's called THYNC. Yes. This company was presenting back at the annual kickoff in February or something like that. It was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. But it's a neurostimulation patch. It's disposable, and it goes into your vagus nerve. Yes. Also, there's a lot of very legitimate treatments that do vagus nerve stimulation, and it seems to have measurable effects. When you stimulate the vagus nerve, you can measure the differences in EEG, and you can see the psychological changes as well. So let me put those, okay, so. Okay, and oh wow, yeah, that would be cool. Okay, what does this mean? Stim, smell, illusions, and beyond. Wonderful. Okay, well, I have those topics for next week. I'm super excited to look into them and dig into some of the data, especially the Motivate GSR stuff. That is new to me. I've never really looked at skin conductance GSR data. So I think it would be a fun thing on the hack nights to just sort of, hey, let's all get familiar with it and see what we see, and let's compare a bunch of conditions and kind of like come up with what we think generates skin response and so on. So yeah, okay, cool. So we'll take a look at that data. We're gonna correlate the spicy response with the electrodermal response. So even before we fully understand what we think the EDA GSR response is. We're going to start by like comparing, hey, is it exact same, or are there differences in how these two onset? And I think that's kind of a cool comparison to do. So looking forward to seeing whoever can make it next week. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll see what we see. And it's always lovely to have everyone here. I think this was a fun one. So thanks for joining. Looking forward to diving into some of those discussions. And it was really nice having everyone.